So, today's video is something that I'm actually a little bit scared to make. And that's mostly because I know it's not really going to be a fun, well-accepted point of view. So, hello world, I'm Amelia. And today's subject in particular I wanted to talk about is actually why I don't like the trans community, or really honestly kind of some of the stuff about the LGBT community as a whole. But it mostly relates to the trans community. I'm going to try to keep it in that topic, but I might mention some things outside of that spectrum just to make a point. So one of my big things that I do not like about the community is the fact that there are things that we find as acceptable. Things that we do not denounce, things that the community does not come against. And in a lot of ways it ends up just hurting our perception. It hurts who we are, and it makes it hard for people on the outside to actually be able to interact with transgender people. And I mean, if it's anything from the Jessica Yanives or the 50-something-year-old guy who decides he's a 6-year-old girl, I do not believe that these are legit people of the community. These are just people who end up getting a voice because they're seen as weird. And people want to give them that voice. Some of them do it for the intent of destroying the community, and some of them do it because they don't know any better. And the problem is that when you come in, some of us trans people, like in my case, come out to friends and family, or particularly parents. They keep looking at those negative stigmas, and they just assume that because, oh, you identify as being transgender now, that you somehow are okay with these things. You are okay with these real extremes, like the people who are like, oh yeah, in a past life I used to be a tree. And, you know, I'm 100 different genders at once. And the problem is they keep looking at those really weird, on the edge things, and then it just hurts the view. And I'm not really necessarily saying this is something that I'm like yelling at people to fix. This is just one of the things that I find kind of irritating about the community as a whole. So one of the first things that I actually have a problem with in the community is the fact that the community likes to have this idea that if you are transgender, that somehow that automatically means that you are a liberal socialist. And that couldn't be further from the truth. On the political viewpoint of that, there are plenty of people in the community who are not a liberal socialist, and the problem is that a lot of people in the community just assume it. I've had people assume that I support universal health care just because I'm transgender, when in reality I don't. I actually am very much against it for reasons that are beyond the scope of this video, and I'll probably get into them one day, but for now that's the point. Is we need to, the community assumes these things of people in the community. I've had them personally assume things of me, even regarding my religion. There's people that believe that because you're transgender, you should automatically be an atheist. That, again, while it is something that is getting better and it is changing, it's still a view that a lot of people in the community have. I personally, if you've heard, I've said it before, I am a revivalist Christian. I have a very unique point of view of Christianity that I feel allows me to be transgender. The next thing that I actually find kind of irritating about the community, and something that I don't like, is the fact that the community automatically assumes that the trans umbrella includes everything non-binary, third gender, whatever else. And the problem is with that is that I don't see it that way. If you are transgender, that typically means you are going from your assigned gender at birth to the opposite binary. And yes, I realize that the word trans can actually mean basically just transitioning from anything to anything else. However, going off of what the traditional sense of what transgender means, the whole establishment of the T in LGBT was people like me, people who are male going to female and female going to male. And what's happened is that now non-binary people are being included under this concept. So now not only do they get there and sit there and be, well, I'm non-binary, they also like to walk around and say they're trans. Now, I do believe you could be transfeminine, transmasculine, which is very similar to those concepts of being transgender, being a transgender woman, a transgender man. However, the problem is that you're riding the backs. They're riding the backs of our cause, what was supposed to be our part of the community. And now because it's accepted that these people are included, it kind of drowns out the message. Because then, for example, going back to like my parents, they look from the outside in and they're like, well, all you transgender people are genderqueer and all these other weird things. When that's not the case. People like me are trying to make a case that I deal with gender dysphoria. I felt it from the age of 4. It demeans what people like me go through. That's kind of a problem I have with the community. And the only time that I really believe there's an exception to this idea is if you're intersex. Because even, honestly, most of the time somebody who's intersexed was assigned a sex at birth and they are transitioning to the opposite of that, regardless if that's their biological sex or not. That would be the only time I believe there's really an exception to this rule. Something else that I have as a problem is the fact that it's pretty well accepted that children can transition. That children should be allowed to transition just like an adult, which I personally do not believe should be permissible under the fact that there has been statistics taken that say that transgender people that have transitioned at before puberty ages typically have a 60% regret rate, when somebody like myself who is transitioned later has only about a 2% chance of regret. Less than in most cases. And the problem is that because, I mean, and this was even a matter of fact something that had been brought up in conversations with people about my beliefs, was, oh, well, that means you support children transitioning. And the honest answer is I don't actually. In my opinion, most kids should not start any kind of medical intervention until the age of 14 or 15. 2 years of puberty is usually can be reversed, can have the clock turned back. And yeah, I realize that there are some things, like, for example, a boy could grow taller and a biological girl could develop breasts that she would have to deal with. But there's too much risk involved in just putting children on puberty blockers so that we can figure it out. We are getting better at detecting adolescents' gender dysphoria and addressing it. The problem is I do not believe we're there yet. I do not believe we are in a position yet where we can detect it well enough to actually guarantee that it's going to be perfect and right on every time. The risk is too high. And I'm sorry, and well, I understand. I dealt with it too. I had gender dysphoria. At the age of 12, I would have loved to have been becoming a girl, developing female sexual characteristics, secondary characteristics. Wow, I cannot say that word right. But even then, it would have been even far more riskier for me to be doing that at the age of 12, being that I was born in the 80s. Another slight thing that, just piling on the list of things that I kind of have beef with the community about, is the fact that there are a lot of people that view it as a trend. They don't see it as a legit problem, as something that legitimately we need help. They're seeing it as it's the trendy thing to do. They're talking about how in Australia, New Zealand, Britain, they're seeing an increase of young people who are being referred to gender clinics, and these doctors talking to them, and they're like, yeah, I kind of want to transition because I think it's kind of cool. I think it's the trendy thing to do. And the problem is that there's a lot of people that come on this idea and they see the trendiness and the fun of transitioning, and they kind of jump into it for that reason. I mean, I browse trans subreddits, and you wouldn't believe how on some of these subreddits there's people asking time after time again, am I trans? Does this mean I'm trans? Do I deal with this? I'm trans. I'm sorry, if you're trans, you would know. You would know, because typically gender dysphoria is related to being trans. If you are dealing with gender dysphoria to a very massive, large degree, you're gonna know. You're not gonna just sit there and go, I don't know, am I trans? Because I want to put a skirt on. Does that make me a girl? There's not. That shows trendiness. And the problem is that that's another thing that just hurts the community. It hurts the perception of the community. And yeah, I realize that most of my arguments to all of this has come from the fact that I am concerned with the perception of the community, but it is really a legit concern, because not only does it hurt someone like me, it hurts everybody in the community. Something else that I come across in the community is the fact that there are a lot of trans people, be it that a lot of them are elitists, are putting down other trans people. It's one of those things that's bad enough that I don't like. I mean, just naturally, I don't like identifying myself as transgender to begin with. But the problem is that it is bad enough that I don't like to identify myself as transgender. An example of how much that is true for myself is like when I go into a doctor's office and they have an intake form with the question of what your gender is, and they give you more options than just male or female. I'm not very usually inclined to check the boxes as, yeah, I'm a transgender male to female. I don't usually like checking that box. Matter of fact, the last time I went to urgent care, I checked the box that actually said female, because that's what it said on my driver's license. And honestly, the person said nothing about it. I got my treatment, I got out of there, everything was fine. But that's how much that I really do not care to be identified with this community when we are putting down other people in the community. Even people like me have been put down. People telling, well, you're not pretty enough. You don't pass. You should just give up now. Especially, I have seen people literally out there saying things like, well, you should go, you know what, to yourself, because you're never going to pass. You're never going to be a woman. And I think that's deplorable. That is a terrible thing to be very common in this community. And it really upsets me about the acceptance and what this community is all about. So, just in general, that's one of the things. I realize, again, it can be people who are elitists that tend to have those ideas. But it turns me off to the community. It turns me off to having that label put on me. It's just one of those things I really don't care to have on me. Just a small thing going outside of the trans umbrella is the LGBT community as a whole. Now, I realize that there are people who like to belong. There are people that like to be a part of something. And that I get. But one of the things is I'm not a fan of pride parades. I'm not a fan of taking pride in the LGBT community. And I believe that there is worth to being happy with who you are and feeling accepted, and matter of fact, going out and celebrating it. The problem is that when it comes to the LGBT community, and I am not putting anybody in the community down, by all means, be who you are, but this is something that I don't personally like about the community, is how, I'll just say it, how gay it can sometimes get. And that would probably be why I would be probably one of the very few advocates that are kind of in that, like, well, you know what, if we ever had a divide where the T left the LGB, I wouldn't miss it. Because, I mean, number one, I do consider myself straight. I am a straight female. I'm attracted to men. yeah, maybe, and even beyond that, even before I had started transitioning, I was a straight male. I was attracted to women. It was something that flip-flopped for me. I was never at one point in my life gay. And the thing is that I wouldn't miss that half of the community just because that seems to be where that pride comes in. Again, you be you. But it's just that personal thing where I see it and I'm just kind of, I don't know, So anyways, I hope this video actually didn't run too long, and I hope I made a clear and concise point. My voice, it's getting late in the day, and my voice does tend to do this usually by closer to the end of the day. So I think I'm going to end it there. I hope you can understand what I'm trying to say. I am not hating on anyone. I'm not trying to say that this is wrong. I'm not trying to be like, oh my gosh, I hate everything about the community. I love people in the community. I love people. And I want people to be happy. I want other trans people to be happy. And that's why my concerns go beyond my personal comfort. It's about trans people putting other trans people down. It's about the perception of the outside. When people like my parents are looking in and they assume things about trans people that are not true. And that's just the things that I don't like about the community, and it's why, honestly, I'm not really a huge supporter of the community. I don't go to pride parades. I don't take part in huge amounts of involvement. Like, the most I ever have considered doing with the community is actually volunteering for an actual outreach to reach people in the community. I'm talking like, for example, like volunteering for my clinic or stuff like that. But other than that, it's just one of those things I'm not really a huge fan of, I know that's, again, like I said, I was afraid for making this video because I know this isn't going to really be a popular opinion. So anyways, I think I'm going to end it there and kind of end this while I'm ahead before this starts really downgrading from here. So I'll see you later. Bye.